A world energy crisis. Well, this is a term we keep hearing so often. We hear about the rising prices of oil. We hear about the electric revolution, but the issue with infrastructure. And on top of it all, we hear about the roaring rise of consumption among the global consumer and how energy, the supply of energy, is at a big threat and a risk. However, why don't we look up for the answer? That's right, the sun, a source of energy for life. Are we making the right use of it for our economic purposes? Are we maximizing the potential that it has to offer? Well, the answer is solar. Solar energy, they say, has a global potential which can go up to 50,000 exajoules. Now, mind you, that is more than the total global energy demand as well. But what are we doing about it as a country? We are, one would say, during the hot months, cursed with sun, but however, one would say from an energy supply viewpoint, we are blessed with abundant sunshine throughout the whole year. Are we making the right decisions from a policy perspective, from a consumption perspective with regard to solar? This globally is indeed a $1 trillion industry. But what about the Sri Lanka's potential for this sector? Let's talk about that today on Bisnomics, here on your weekend's most profitable 60 minutes. And joining me for today's discussion is the President of the Solar Industries Association of Sri Lanka, Mr. Kushan Jayasuriya. Kushan, welcome to Bisnomics.
Thank you, Tarindu, for inviting me for your show.
And let's shed some light, and or I would say let the sun shine on the questions we have with regard to this sector,
yes,
so that we can all see how we can maximize the potential of this sector for Sri Lanka. Kushan, I want to ask you, solar power, now very heavily spoken about. I remember those days, the little watches we used to wear had a solar panel, and year 4, year 5 science we used to learn about this. But we speak about the positive impact on the environment, but from a very layman's perspective, one would ask, and we hear people asking this, what about when there is no sunshine? Okay. How can we get power? Will we be in darkness? Tell us about how this solar power technology actually works, Kushan.
Right. Tarindu, first of all, you spoke about the global potential. I think it's important that we talk about the Sri Lankan potential also.
Absolutely.
So, according to the energy maps given out by the Sustainable Energy Authority of Sri Lanka, we have an average of between 5 to 5.5 hours of peak sunlight. In layman's terms, it means very good sunlight. So, we are highly blessed with a lot of sunlight, and we should not worry about not having sunlight, because historically we have always been blessed with because of our positioning close to the equator, we have plenty of sunlight. Now, your question is, on a gloomy day, what will happen? Now, there are various kinds of solar systems. Some have batteries, but most of them do not have a battery, they are connected to the grid. So, let us start with the battery system. The battery systems are always designed for a scenario what we call days of autonomy. So, if we do not have sunshine for maybe 1 or 2 days, the batteries are sized so that they will work. So, it is all about the sizing. So, a lot of developed countries use this technology, and if it is failing, I do not think they are energy sufficient. So, the question is, if there is a gloomy day, it will work. Depends on how you have sized it, depends on how you want it on a gloomy day. When it comes to a grid connected system, where
and that's the more common one that we see everywhere.
So in Sri Lanka, I think most of the systems are grid connected. So, there the popular question is, if there is a rainy month, will I get my kilowatt hours or will I get my investment back? The reality is, even on a gloomy day, it will work. It will not work as much as on a very sunny day, but if we take as an average a solar system equaling to 1 kilowatt, if it is fitted on your roof, will give you approximately 110 kilowatt hours as an annual average. It will go up in particular months and it will come down, but the reality is solar energy is reliable. We do not have to worry, especially on Sri Lankan context.
Understood. And with regard to this grid connectivity, I want to ask you now, if I install a solar solution in my house or my business premise, by having it connected to the grid, that means I am also able to be a supplier to the grid. Is that correct?
Yes. They call it the prosumer, or where the consumer becomes a producer also. So, this is actually a modern concept. If you go to Australia or Germany or USA, solar energy is often very easily pumped into the grid in decentralized situations. So, we want it to be a community based power generation source, so that the community will invest and hopefully all stakeholders can have a benefit through it.
Noted. So, let us talk about solar for households and solar for companies. Now, there are so many companies that are thinking, should I go on a solar basis, or do I think that no, I would go with the traditional power sources, like for example hydro, which they might think to be more consistent. Now, according to your view, how can a household or a business maximize the economic benefit that solar has to offer them?
Okay. So, Sri Lanka has 3 main schemes in terms of how you can opt into. The most popular one is known as net metering, where you can have your own solar system on your roof. It will typically will be sized from, let us say, 2 kilowatt to maybe 10 kilowatt. And if you notice under our tariff scheme, if you use more than 180 kilowatt hours, which most of the urban houses will have, you are billed at 45 rupees. So, 45 rupees is a lot of money. So, if you have a solar system and if you can offset their energy bill, you can have a payback of approximately 5 years, which is very good, because then you can have your own comfort of having the air conditioners and everything. So, if you are a household, the most popular model should be net metering, where you offset your energy bill. Then there is another modality where you can actually save the extra energy if you produce and take it as rupees. So, for the first 7 years under net accounting, you get 22 rupees, and after that it is 15.50. The previous one, net metering, you can save your excess energy if you have and use them as energy credits. So, those are the 2 most popular models for domestic clients.
We see today some large organizations like large factories where they have enormous property and big buildings. We see, we even saw recently some tea companies actually converting their rooftops into solar, when I believe their effort is, while they also get energy for their own business, they could also easily look at giving it back to the grid.
Yes, under the Surya Bala Sangramaya program, the third model is known as Net Plus, where we export all the energy we generate and we get compensated in terms of rupees. Now, if you go for a system like that, your payback is I would say about 6 years, but still it is attractive for an investor to go for it, and it is clean energy. And lot of the manufacturing companies now are given points from their clients for green manufacturing.
Correct. And with more sustainability initiatives and sustainability focus coming into play, the triple bottom line, the sustainable energy sources, I believe when businesses get that kind of green energy, solar is green energy, and when they get that, I believe it also reflects positively on their image as well.
Yes, of course, because if you look at a large solar rooftop, let us say even 500 to 1 megawatt, we do not cut any trees, we do not clear any land, we use the existing infrastructure, minimal resources, we have our solar system on the roof. And also it's also an incentive for people to opt for solar power systems, and on the long run those systems will easily work for 20 to 25 years with minimal intervention. So, those are, I believe that they are very, very good models we have under the Surya Bala Sangramaya program.
Kushan, now you are here representing the Solar Industries Association of Sri Lanka.
Yeah.
Tell us about this association, not very much often heard of.
Yeah, actually Solar Industries Association, I would say, is the oldest solar industry association in the country, and obviously the largest association. So, we date back to almost 2 decades, and we were very active during the previous programs, which were mainly battery based. So, for the past 20 years, we have been a lobby group. We want solar energy to be part of the government policy, which we have even worked with this government, and we want more incentives for the solar industry, where there will be more jobs, more opportunities created for the local engineers and technicians. And also, we want this to be a good industry for the investors. There are a lot of companies that have come recently, they are doing very well in terms of large solar or renewable energy businesses. So, Solar Industries Association has been the forefront in promoting solar energy to all the stakeholders, starting from the utility to the utility commissions. So, we are very active, and I would believe we represent more than 50% of the market share, both in terms of rooftops and also in terms of solar as an investment, which are obviously large companies. Most of them are our members.
Excellent. Nice to hear that such a industry with high potential is actually very well organized and structured, and well done to you on that.
Yeah.
What about the programs? What are the programs that your association is actually doing? And can consumers come to your association to get the information?
Right. Our association at the moment is limited to companies who are engaged in the business of solar energy. When I say business, it includes solar installers, we call them EPC contractors, or investors, or large corporates who are doing energy business as their main focus. So, unfortunately, we do not have an opening for individuals, but in future we are thinking about it too. But at the moment, we are actually focusing on the solar industries and the policy and how we can integrate more solar energy into our system.
Kushan, now when any industry is growing,
yes,
while it attracts the genuine businesses, there is also a chance where some of the players who might not be quite honest in their dealings also trying to enter, and as a result, end of the day, the customer can get hoodwinked and fall into trouble, making them distrust the entire association, unfortunately.
Yes.
They say one bad egg is enough to spoil the pudding. My question to you is, when a customer for a business or maybe for their home, when they are looking at going for a solar solution, what are the characteristics they should look for in their supplier?
If you are looking at a contractor to carry out your solar installation, the first aspect you have to look into is if the supplier or the installer is registered with the Sustainable Energy Authority.
SEA.
Yes, SEA we call it. And normally in all our literature, we have to mention whether our company is registered with the SEA. It's always good to give a call to SEA. They are a very supportive organization, and check if the company is good. There is no harm, because we are looking at a lifetime investment, and it is good to know from where you are getting. So, the Sustainable Energy Authority regulates the quality and the reliability of all the installers. Unfortunately, there are cases where installers have hoodwinked the customers and taken the money or the project and have gone away. So, because of that, the Sustainable Energy Authority is very, very concerned, and they have a very good track record of what we are doing. Everything is monitored by them.
Roughly, I mean, to your knowledge, how many players are we looking at in this market on a ballpark figure?
Yeah, so I think about 1 year ago, we had about 200 installers, and now I heard that it's about 350, which I think is not sustainable, because what happens is when an industry grows exponentially, which I think this industry will,
is facing, yes.
People will start forming companies without understanding the gravity and the responsibilities they have to take on behalf of the customers. I'm not saying all companies are perfect, but because of due to lack of knowledge, or maybe because of lack of interest, we have seen even very large, or I would say very companies which were believed to be trusted have also just hoodwinked the customers and have gone away. So, unfortunately, this is a very bad situation. However, the positive side is that the regulator is always watching. So, if we
the SEA.
So, if you have a solar system which is not attended by the company installed, please call the Sustainable Energy Authority, they will do their best. The only issue is Sustainable Energy Authority is not liable.
Understood.
They are only a regulator.
What government policy decisions are needed to strengthen the solar power sector of Sri Lanka? Let's talk about that on the other side of this short break. This is Bisnomics. Welcome back to Bisnomics, your weekend's most profitable 60 minutes. I'm Tharundu Amarasekara. Today, we are talking about powering up your business and your household with solar energy. What do you need to know about this? And most importantly, what potential does this sector hold for our economy? And joining me for this discussion is Kushan Jayasuriya, the president of the Solar Industries Association of Sri Lanka. Kushan, now any industry which has so much potential to be offered to the economy, to transform the economy simply, because energy is a key deciding factor of how successful an economy is going to be. That's a reality.
Yeah.
Now, I believe that this is one of those sectors that needs proper government policy.
Yes.
Is there a proper government policy in Sri Lanka with regard to solar energy, and is this policy being active? Now, here's the most important question. Are there any changes that are needed towards this policy towards the solar sector?
Yeah, thank you, Raju. The good news is that the government has a policy, which was 80% of the generation shall be from renewable energy sources. I think it has been changing here and there, but now we are at 70% as the policy. The name has been changing renewables to clean, but we believe it has to be renewables. So, the government, we believe, has done a very good thing in terms of appointing a minister for renewable energy, which we didn't have before. So, we have what we call a solar minister. So, it's easier for us to go and talk to him, at least we believe, and raise our issues and give them the options so that solar energy can be more utilized. So, under this program, I think the first tender came very recently, which was about 100 kilowatts, and I think multiples of 100 kilowatts, about 7,000 of such systems. So, we hope and we believe that this project will be implemented not within years, within months, so that it will be a success story for the solar energy industry and obviously for all stakeholders. However, the only issue what we see with this is the government has to make sure that this is a sustainable business model.
Not just a one-off show-off program.
Yes, because the state utility, they don't have to make money. All they have to do is to provide the service, and maybe the treasury will give them money. But the energy sector cannot operate as I would say a charity. They need reasonable amounts of profits. And under the new government's vision, they want the community also to be integrated into this system in addition to the large players, which is why they have this 100 kilowatt program, which we are very much aware. However, if you look at the tariff rates, it's 13.5 rupees on the lower side, and in some areas we are given 17 or 16 rupees, but in those areas you don't get much sunlight, or the land is horrendously expensive. So, whilst I appreciate the government's vision of 70 to 80%, we as the industry would have appreciated that this tender came on an open bid rather than a ceiling tariff of 13.5 to 17.5, because then if there are no bidders, then unfortunately the project becomes a flop. Now, with all good heart, we believe that it will be a success. We want more solar to come. But if there is no incentive or if there is no money, this 100 into 7,000 transformer connections will not work. Correct. So, the vision is there. I think we have a good system. Unfortunately, how we execute, we have to be careful, because if we don't look at energy as a business, that industry will fail and we will not have power plants.
Understood.
Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the common concern that people have, saying that solar is actually an expensive source of energy. We hear this all the time, even with regard to some of the solar power plants that were created in Sri Lanka at certain points. There were concerns about, okay, saying that solar is an expensive source of energy. But when you compare, let's say, solar with certain other types of energy sources, what do you think, both in terms of the direct cost and also the environmental impact? Because when you're going for any energy sector project, or for that matter for any industries, any project, you need to know your costs and the benefits. And even solar being a clean energy, there will be a certain cost factor being involved, because some of the people who are somewhat against solar or are still trying to promote cheaper energy, they keep saying coal is still cheaper. That coal is still a cheaper source of energy, and even some economists argue for it. Kushan, what are your thoughts?
See, we have to look at the entire life cycle. When we talk about the cost in terms of solar energy, we only talk about the initial cost, which is relatively, I would say, higher, but nobody talks about the entire life cycle cost.
Correct.
When we talk about traditional power plants, unfortunately, we exclude the capital cost, we only talk about the operational cost. So, it does not work that way.
Serving the two in two different
ways. Yes. So it is evident if you look at if you simply do a Google search, solar energy is as competitive as the traditional energy sources. However, what is interesting to know is that if you look at the reports, I think it was done in 2017 by the Public Utilities Commission. There is an additional cost of social and environmental related of approximately 10 rupees.
Okay.
So, each according to the PUCSL, these are not my facts, we are talking 10 rupees of additional operational and social and environmental costs. If we look at diesel, if I am not mistaken, it is about 7.5 rupees according to PUCSL. If you look at the Sapugaskanda, for example, power plant, we are talking about 4.5 or 4.6 rupees. So, nobody talks about the social and environmental cost when they compare these two. See, we are a country that is blessed with enormous amount of solar. Out of the 360 days, at least 300 days we have good sunlight.
Easily.
So, the government,
sometimes we say we have too much.
Yeah, we have too much. So, if the government policy is 70 or 80% of renewables, I think as stakeholders it is our job and we should strive to achieve that, rather than us trying to go through the traditional routes of coal. Yes, I think if you look at the operational cost of coal without the environmental capital, it is cheaper, because that is how it's done. But if you do an apple to apple comparison, I don't believe that solar energy is expensive.
Kushan, and some people also say the way that a developed country, like for example US, looks at their energy needs and goes for the expensive sources like solar, versus a developing country with so much of budget deficit issues like Sri Lanka, we looking at our energy needs and trying, because our emission levels are still quite low compared with a country like US. And a poorer country or a developing country like Sri Lanka trying to go for expensive energy sources, they say is not practically making sense. What is your answer to that?
So, if we look at the Sri Lankan context, I think for thermal power we pay more than 30 rupees, easily 35 or even more. And in most of those energy power plants, the fuel cost, we call it, is passed through. So, the government will have to pay the additional fuel cost plus their overheads. So, if the fuel prices go up, the government will pay. So, for thermal they are paying more than between 30 to 40 rupees. And for solar, the levelized cost is only 19. If you look at the average cost of purchase for CEB, I think the cost of energy is about 23.5 rupees for CEB, and still solar is 19 even on the rooftop context. So, solar energy so far has been a great contributor to the nation. I do not think any other power plant has done this much of service. I am not saying solar energy can replace a diesel generator or a coal power plant. It does not work that way.
Apples and oranges, as you said.
Yeah. So, this needs a spinning reserve. We accept all of that. But if you are comparing kilowatt to kilowatt hour, solar energy is a great power source to have.
You mentioned multiple times about the target of going for 70 to 80% out of
Yeah.
renewable energy, but we don't see Sri Lanka being anywhere near that,
Yeah.
Kushan. In your perspective, what's the contribution so far from solar energy for the power energy needs of Sri Lanka?
Yeah, I think Sri Lanka, I think there's a wider story to what we are discussing. Sri Lanka has approximately 300 megawatts of rooftop solar, purely invested by the private sector. There's not much infrastructure needed, and this 300 megawatts of solar, we are contributing almost 2.5% of the nation's annual demand. So, our annual demand is approximately 15,900 gigawatt hours according to CB statistics. So, out of this, I think we provide about 400 gigawatt hours from solar rooftop only. And also from the ground mounted systems, I believe we have about 80 megawatts of ground mounted systems, which will give you maybe 130 gigawatt hours annually. So, this contributes to approximately 1%. So, out of our total demand in terms of annually, I think solar is contributing 3.5%. Now, your question is, why are solar power plants not coming? Now, I think in your earlier question, I couldn't answer properly. According to the CEB information we get, there is also, in addition to this 100 to 7,000 program, there is also a plan to have 2 numbers of 100 megawatt power plants, solar, they will tender it. And also they are planning to have about 150 megawatts of solar through smaller power plants, maybe multiples of 10. Now, historically, if we go back to up to 3 years, they have tendered one into 60 megawatts and one into 90 megawatts, and then there was another 150 megawatts. The reason why only maybe 40 or 50 megawatts have realized out of these many megawatts is we have issues with related to approvals. Now, in Sri Lanka, if you want to do a projects, I mean, if you take a solar project, I think we have 15 approvals.
15?
Yes, and all those approvals are in series. You have to go to one government office, then from that you have to go to the, and in between, if you get stuck halfway, you have to go back.
Restart.
Right? And at the end of the tail, if a government institute, maybe let's say wildlife or forest or environmental, if one institute says your land is not suitable,
yes,
you have to forget the entire thing, back to square one.
Understood.
With another 6 month process. So, we just because we have a government policy, it does not work unless we have a very strong mechanism to give approvals, as the government said, they are trying, they say within 2 weeks, but I do not know whether it is possible. Unless there is a mechanism to implement these projects without bureaucracy, these ground mounted projects will not come.
Noted, Kushan.
Yeah.
What are the concerns that the authorities are having regarding some of the recent solar energy policy decisions? Let's talk about that on the other side of this break. This is Bisnomics. Welcome back to Bisnomics, your weekend's most profitable 60 minutes. Our focus today is on the solar energy sector, the potential, the problems and the policy decisions needed to take this industry forward. And joining me for this discussion is the President of the Solar Industries Association of Sri Lanka, Mr. Kushan Jayasurya. Kushan, now you explained to us from the supplier side some of the perspectives that they have, then from the consumer side some of the perspectives. Now, the authorities also are having certain concerns regarding some of the pricing that is available, the pricing through the tenders, etc. Tell us about this issue.
See, the main focus is that the claim where the solar rooftops are offered a significantly high tariff rate. So
offered by
the utility.
Utility.
Yeah. So, this 22 rupees which is in discussion is only for 7 years. But
so 22, if you can explain this 22 rupees,
yeah,
that is
so
what is offered.
If we have a rooftop and if we sell energy to the national grid, we get 22 rupees for the first 7 years, and after that 15.5 rupees up to the 20th year. That means from the 7th year to the 20th year. So, this 22 rupees is only for 7 years. Nobody talks about the 15.5 rupee value that is occurring after the 15th year. If you look at any success story across the world, community based solar power systems have always been motivated by a special rate. Now you
it's an incentive.
It's an incentive. Nobody is going to invest on a system that is not going to have a reasonable payback, at least 5 years or 6 years. You are not going to put your money on a system that is not going to give you any return. But look at the positive thing. Sri Lanka has a 300 megawatt solar power plant if we cumulatively look at the rooftop installations. So, the levelized cost, if we look at the 22 rupees for 7 years and 15.50 for, is about 19 rupees. Now, 19 rupees is still, I would believe, than the average price the utilities purchasing electricity. Once again, I am not saying we are trying to compare with a thermal power plant or diesel power plant, but this claim of 22 rupees cannot be really justified because we are only getting 15.50, and after 7 years most of the households on the higher tariff slab have installed. I think most of the rooftops have also installed. Now actually you can't find large rooftops because most of them are filled with solar. So, 15.50 from the 7th year is not a significant amount. I would believe that in another 7 years time the cost of the utilities procurement as an average would be significantly higher. If we did not motivate these rooftop owners to put their own solar power system, we would not have a solar power industry, we would not have solar power. Look at the ground mount situation. For the past 3 years, maybe we have only 80 megawatts. Why? Because the tariff is low, there are a lot of barriers. So, this is an industry that has worked well, that is functioning well.
It's proven.
It's proven, and also if you look at thermal cost, I think CEB's most of the revenue, if I am not mistaken, that is 40% of the CEB's income is given to thermal power. I think thermal power we procure at a price above 30. So, yes, it is important that if we have a benefit from solar energy, it has to be passed to the utility. But it is also important that we look at the bigger picture where we pay about 19 billion for thermal energy. Look at that tariff also, which we are paying about 30, and see how we can work around. You cannot substitute an industry that is giving below cost. For example, I think the cost for CEB in terms of procurement energy is about 23 rupees, but they are selling at somewhere around, I do not have the exact figure, maybe 16.5. So, obviously CEB has to make a loss because you are buying at a high rate and selling at a low rate.
Then the government has to subsidize
it. But then you having an argument of because we are making a loss at 16 rupees, solar energy also has to be given below, does not work. It is not a business model. So, if we do not, the reality is energy is a business.
And the sooner we see it, the better it will get
and there is no installer or there is no company that is going to invest money without a return. So, if we look at it in that perspective, we will have a very good industry. But I must tell that under the present system, you can only get this 22 rupees for the 7 years and 15 the levelized cost only on the rooftops. Anything on the ground has to go through the government's tender procedure because the utility encourages competition, but you can't compare the two. I will give you a good example. Now, let us say the price of rooftop is approximately 19 rupees per kilowatt hour as a levelized. There is no distribution cost with the rooftop. You generate it, you use it. Maybe it will go to your neighbor and someone very close by. But on the other hand, if you have a large solar power system, I think you will waste about 4 rupees in terms of transmission losses and all those. So, solar rooftop is not as bad as people claim. I will tell you another example. If I am not mistaken, the larger power plant which the utility has commissioned is about 14 rupees. I have not seen a power plant that is commissioned below 14 rupees. So, 14 rupees for the power plant distribution cost maybe 2-3 rupees, still it is almost coming to that. So, I am not saying we have to hold this levelized cost of approximately 19 rupees forever. We will have to modify it or relook at it, but this is not the time, because the alternative for what the rooftop community gives is going to be much expensive.
Understood.
So, yeah.
Let us talk about the readiness of the utility authorities. For example, is the CEB, the LECO, are they ready to really absorb the solar power into the national grid, and if not, are there any barriers, and what is the solution to that?
See, the CEB or the LECO, or we shall call the authorities, have 2 models of absorbing solar power. One is the rooftop, the other one is through their public tenders for ground mounted projects.
Which you said did not really take
off.
off.
Because of various reasons, but we hope it will work. But starting from the rooftop, I think there are limitations, because the reality is we are a third world country, and we may have given more connections from a transformer, or we would have taken the line to a longer length than we should have. So, when we try to feed power from various points, what we call what happens is there will be a voltage rise. Now, what we have told the authorities is try and improve the grid system, because the government policy is 70 to 80%, but we know there are limitations. So, the government is also curtailing the number of installations. We have to get pre-approvals, that takes about 4 weeks. At the end of the day, it takes about 8 weeks if you are lucky to get a connection. So, there are barriers because our infrastructure is not ready. So, the ideal vision, I believe, is to develop the infrastructure, or maybe change their management system in terms of electricity, so that more rooftops can be absorbed. The second model CEB absorbs power is through the ground mounted larger projects, which will range from 1 megawatt to maybe at the moment 12 megawatts, or sorry 10 megawatt of capacity. Now, those projects, the good news is that the government is trying to tender about 200 megawatts within the next year or 2.
A progressive step.
A progressive step, but what we are telling is the tenders have to be evaluated very quickly. The utility or the government has to help the developer in terms of approvals, otherwise you expect, you send a letter to a government office, they do not work on email, and you might be lucky if they reply within couple of weeks. So, if those issues are ratified, we will see larger power plants and we will see more solar, but it is not easy. We are a third world country, lot of bureaucracy. So, if the government is capable of what it is promising, then we will have a better future for ground mounts, which can be implemented in many megawatts in terms of scale.
Kushan, on a final note, now we spoke about the energy supply aspect of the economic contribution.
Yeah.
Let us talk about a different angle. The future for solar in Sri Lanka. Do you really see a big potential, number one, and number two, we still tend to see a very heavy reliance on foreign technology.
Yeah.
But what about the homegrown solar technologies? Is it happening, number one, and also what about the employment opportunities created through solar, because all these sustainability and digital based solutions are supposed to be taking off a lot of jobs, but it is also adding a lot of jobs.
Yeah.
What about the employment aspect of solar energy to the Sri Lankan economy?
See, if we did a recent study as the association, the employment opportunities at the moment, they run into thousands. Thousands.
Not bad for a industry of this nature.
So there are, if we take approximately 300 companies, there are many thousands of jobs offered. The Sustainable Energy Authority, I think, trains about at least 200 to 300 technicians annually. So those technicians also become skilled people,
Yeah, skilled
and
labor.
they are useful for the society whether they do solar or not. I believe that the potential is there. It's if you look at most of the houses in Colombo, you see a solar power system. So we encourage them also to participate in the national energy program. So I think that's the industry is big. Earlier it was small and medium companies.
Yes.
But if you look at the big players now, even public quoted or very large corporates have ventured into this solar installations or solar investments.
And just to add, not on a solar front, but with regard to renewable energy, we recently saw one of the biggest IPOs, you know, to be debuted soon, actually being from the renewable sector. So shows that even investors are really keen on this sector, isn't it?
I don't want to mention names, but I think that offering was oversubscribed.
Absolutely, multiple times.
Which means that the Sri Lankan community is very confident that there will be a future for renewable energy, and there will be. My belief is that solar energy can play a pivotal role in terms of renewable energy if it is managed in a careful way.
Correct.
So we hope and pray that the government or the state will have a clear policy and will give clear directions where maximum solar energy can be integrated into our national system.
And the people who you said are coming, getting trained and becoming technicians, do they also get access to some of the overseas foreign job opportunities as well, Kushan?
Yeah, a lot of the technicians who we train for, even as the association, we have been training technicians for almost 15 years. I mean, I think as a schoolboy, I participated in the training program of this association. I think that's about 20 years ago.
Okay.
And most of them have got skill jobs abroad because electricity is electricity, whether it's solar or renewables. And also you asked the question about the technology. Most of the companies in Sri Lanka, including these large corporates, even PLCs we are talking, they have a very good technological brain. If you go, if we travel abroad, lot of the universities have Sri Lankan professors and doctors in our field. Many universities in Britain, Australia, some of the heads of their departments are Sri Lankans. So they have a very good link with the industry, with modern day communication. So they also help us. Technology, I think Sri Lanka has. Sri Lanka implemented a 10 megawatt ground mounted project, where one of the CEO was personal known, in 3 months or 4 months.
Oh wow.
10 megawatts. So that means we have the skill, we have the knowledge. What we need is a clear direction, and for the government to look at energy as a business model, not as a charity on its own. Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah.
The solar energy sector, the potential it has to offer for this country, and what policy decisions do we need in order to make this sector a stronger contributor to our economy. This was the focus today on Bisnomics. I'm indeed thankful to Kushan Jayasuriya for having joined us today for this discussion. Kushan, you definitely did light up the conversation with all the energy that you had about and the knowledge you had about this sector. I can see how passionate you are about this industry, and I would like on behalf of Team TV1 to wish you and your team at the Solar Industries Association all the best to go and implement some of these actions and activities and to take this sector forward, and we definitely hope that you get the support from the authorities as well.
Thank you very much, Sarindu, for everything and inviting me for your great show.
Pleasure is always ours.
Thanks.
With that, we wrap up today's episode of Bisnomics. No matter what business you are in, may it be a profitable and a successful one. I'll see you with the next episode.